Hey, Gavin.
Hey, Louie.
Oh my goodness. It feels very, like vintage tonight, don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
Even though you're rocking your new hair, I'm rocking our new merch. It does feel to me pre-pandemic. I just picture myself. It's dark. It's late. We're in your room. It's hot as fuck. We're drinking.
Yeah, always.
I want to go back there. I wanna break free. But you know what? This is good too.
It feels retro's maybe not the right word, but
I think our subject also tonight just has me in this vibe, this mood.
I feel sort of wrapped in warmth, but also a little sad.
Yes. Before we jump all the way in, hi everyone, this is The Mixed Reviews.
We're a film podcast in which we take a subject such as an actor, director, or a mini genre, and what we do is we give you an entire history. We're like a big old history book, but we make it a little more fun, I would say.
Not a big old history book, like a Spark Notes.
Yeah, exactly. We're Cliffs to Cliff's Notes. We're both just Cliffs. I have no idea where this metaphor is going, but then we also tell you what we really like, and then we tell you what we maybe don't like so much.
Yeah, the reviews are in fact mixed, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. And if you go back to last week's episode, in which we had our great guest Connor O'Donnell of the B-Side podcast for the film stage, the reviews on Chris Pine, our prior subject, they were mixed.
They were very mixed.
Yeah, we did not know who we were picking for our 5-star reviews, our 1-star reviews. We didn't know nothing. And it turns out when we did our poll, it was even more mixed.
Yeah, it was kind of contentious, I would say.
Absolutely.
A lot of others came in.
And those others really like ran the gamut. There was a couple Princess Diaries 2. There was a couple Into the Woods.
Some Wonder Woman.
Manish gave Wonder Woman. Yeah, yes. It's interesting to see what everybody likes. But why don't you give the results? And I'm just going to pretend like they didn't happen.
Right, because for the first time, or not the first time, but in a long time, Gavin is in last place at 14% with Unstoppable.
Oh, dead last.
Dead last.
I guess I'm pretty stoppable.
He was stopped, unlike that train. What is Rosario Dawson call it? That's a missile on wheels.
Yes.
It's fun. It's cute. Other came in at 16%, and we mentioned a couple of the things that people mentioned. My pick, Hell or High Water, came in at 32%. And then our special guest's pick, Connor's pick, Star Trek, came in at the top at 38%. So, has that happened before?
I think it may. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
I feel like it'd be rare.
Oh, let's get our interns on it. Interns. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll feed you later. What if our interns were straight?
Like we don't need gay interns. We need straight ones.
Yes.
Like, I mean, honestly, for Chris Pine, like, yeah, I need straight interns. What's going on over there with Chris Pine? I don't get it. I don't get it.
But I will say, people love Captain Kirk, and I do not blame them. I'm a big Star Trek fan, as I said last episode, so...
Yes. And it was great having Connor on. I thought the episode was really good, and it was really nice to hear from all you guys. We had to cut a lot from that episode, so make sure you check out the extra special treats that Gavin's been bopping around on the internets for you guys to enjoy.
I try and get those extra bits out. Sometimes they're really, really funny, and it breaks my heart to cut them. And I'm not saying that it's me being funny. It's usually Louie or the guest. But
it's usually Gavin like, Louie, shut the fuck up.
The end meeting, which we can't do if we were in person, which brings us back again.
And then retro. But that wraps up last episode. Gavin, do we have any more old news to delve into?
We have one last piece of old business, and I do want to highlight it. So when we did our Eddie Murphy episode, Louie mentioned that we got this tweet from one of our wonderful listeners named Nandi, and it said, I've listened to your Viola, Regina, and Latifah episodes, and I just hit play on Catherine O'Hara. You two are giving people the flowers they deserve, and it's so uplifting. And then Nandi went on to actually give us a 5-star review on iTunes
Nandi.
or Apple Podcasts, whichever. I still call it both. If you want to give us a 5-star rating and review, please go on down to Apple Podcasts and do so. If you don't listen to us on Apple Podcasts, you can leave reviews wherever on your favorite streaming app. It's just they're, the big game. So, but anyways, Nandi left us this great review. It says, a joyous celebration of the unsung. I discovered this show through This Had Oscar Buzz, and I'm so grateful. Gavin and Louie take such care with the subject of each episode and do a solid, honest exploration of their work. I am slowly but surely working my way through each episode and was floored to be mentioned in their Eddie Murphy episode. Color my leather suit surprised. My name is Nandi, and I approve of this podcast.
Okay, Nandi and leather, fashion.
Work.
Wait.
Thank you so much for writing in, and thank you so much for leaving us the 5-star review. As I mentioned before, the reviews, really what they do, and I hate begging for them because I feel like I'm like, please give us attention.
Please, attention.
Just a little more attention, please.
I like attention. Attention. Attention, please.
It's fun to rap in a drag queen way. But what it does is it sort of tricks the Apple algorithm into being like, wow, these guys are really popular.
Yeah.
Other people should listen to them. Yeah. Don't you want to be popular like these guys? And so it helps us out. So it's a way that you can give back, I guess, without having to give us anything, really.
You're giving us love, and we...
Lots of love, and that's how we sustain ourselves.
Correct.
That and the blood of virgins. That's how I keep these wrinkles away.
I don't see one in sight. Good for you, Gavin. Pristine.
But that wraps up our old business segment. So why don't we get into the subject of this week's, which was actually brought on by a listener request way back when we did our first big giveaway. The very first entry into our giveaway sent us an email, and it's such a nice email. And I feel really bad because, listen, we have to plan these episodes very far in advance because there's a lot of research that goes into them. Louie and I watch a lot of movies. We watch a lot of interviews. We read a lot of interviews. We read full-on books. So we really want to bring you as much information as we possibly can. And we got this email just entitled A Casual Request. Please, for the love of Black women, can we get a Cicely Tyson episode? She's 95 years old. Every Black actress in Hollywood cites her as an inspiration, and she's fully legendary. Give her her flowers while she's still here. Okay, thanks, bye, Aaron.
Yeah, so Aaron sent that, I believe it was like in October or November.
November 11th.
November. Yeah. And so it's hard, the holidays are hard for us just because we usually have, some themes that we usually do. We have our, our wrap-up, roundup of the year. And so we had added Aaron's suggestion we have a couple that are like in the bank that are upcoming. Including guests coming. And so we finally were like, okay, it's time for Cicely. And we started.
Yeah, we were like, Black History Month. It's a perfect time. She's 96 now.
Right.
We got this on lock. Her autobiography is coming out. We'll give ourselves just enough time to finish it, which, by the way, barely, because the autobiography came out last week, a week ago from the day that we're recording this.
Right. And so literally me and Gavin were texting about, we had just gotten her book and we were reading. And as we were texting, the alert came up on my phone that Miss Cicely Tyson had passed away. And I literally, in all caps, I said, what the fuck, Gavin?
Yeah. I believe your first text was just, she died. And I was like, what does this mean? I couldn't, even though we were texting about her, but yeah, it was so sad and unexpected. And it's
shocking.
Shocking. Yeah. It's one of those things like, the only thing I can sort of compare it to, and I know very different people, very different fields, but David Bowie released his final album only a couple days before he died.
Right.
Cicely Tyson was doing interviews. Her last interview was with, Ryan Seacrest and Kelly Ripa on Live with Kelly and Ryan. And it's crazy because she was doing rounds of press for this book that just came out.
The book is called Just As I Am.
Absolutely. And it is so gorgeous, so beautiful, and so good and so well written. She wrote it in conjunction with Michelle Burford because I want to give her a shout out too, just because, she contributed to it. It's gorgeous, thick book with this beautiful, beautiful image of a bald Cicely Tyson on it.
If you, I listened to the Audible audio version of it. If you listen to it, you hear from her. She talks at the beginning of it, and I was like, oh my God, is Cicely Tyson about to read me her entire life story? She does not. But even just the beginning of that and hearing her talk about, how she waited so long to do this because she thought she didn't have anything to say. She thought like it was kind of silly that people wanted to hear from her. I'm so glad that we got to. I am really happy that we were able to consume all of her work. A lot of her work has to do with the Black experience, Black history.
Very much so.
She was 96 years old, and lived through, just like decades and decades of, seeing the Black civil rights movement really just, everything. She saw everything. She was there. She knew everyone. She has done so much beyond her film career.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking to hear her talk about a lot of that stuff because, she, right up front, she name checks Breonna Taylor, and she says things like, I did not think after all the lives were lost, after all the work we put in, we would still be here doing this fight. And it's sad. It's sad to realize that we're still in that position.
After the debts that were paid with lives to assure us or ensure us of recognition just as human beings. When we were going through the whole civil rights, I thought, well, our children won't have to go through this. But our children are being shot down for no reason whatsoever.
And so, me and Gavin, neither of us is Black, but, we love film. And I think, to what Aaron said, this is a woman that deserves her flowers. And we're just sad that, she's, I can't even say like gone too soon. She lived such a full life, but, it's still such a great loss. She even said, I'm like remembering now in the book, she says, rest in peace, Chadwick. She was still keeping up and talking about all these Black actors and she has a moment in the book where she talks about running into Alfre Woodard and talking about pay.
And literally she talks, when she runs in Alfre Woodard, she talks about pay disparity because essentially Alfre Woodard is incensed because she's not being paid as much as white actresses. And Cicely Tyson realizes, it's not just her. It's not just this older generation. It's happening to everybody. But that's what I love about this book because it is such a celebration of Black Hollywood. She talks about every single person that we have done an episode on gets name checked in it. Regina King, Angela Bassett, Viola Davis, who wrote the foreword for this book, and Alfre Woodard, and the list goes on. And it's hard to imagine somebody who has had more of an impact on not just Black people in America, but Black women in America. Which is such a precious and put upon class of people. So for this episode, think of this as a celebration. Think of this maybe as a stepping stone for you guys to maybe find some of her work that maybe you haven't seen, and really get into and celebrate the life of Cicely Tyson. So Gavin, why don't we jump into the rewind? Cicely Tyson was born on December 19th, 1924. Her family is from Nevis, that's in the West Indies, and it's one of the smallest countries in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, it's a tiny, tiny little island, and her parents immigrated to the United States. They literally went through Ellis Island, and she was born in Harlem. Her mom was Frederica, and her father was William Augustine Tyson, and they were very poor. She led a very humble childhood, very religious childhood. Did she say they were Episcopalian? I believe that's what she said. But that her relationship with her parents, especially her mother, was very important to her. Her father was, a carpenter, but he also was a cheater, philanderer, if you will. That he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, but his vice was women. And her parents had such a kind of buttoned up. It reminded me a lot of I don't want to say my family, obviously not my family, but just like,
No, but I saw reflections of my own family in there
like,
too. I get
a lot of like not talking about like what's wrong, a lot of keeping quiet.
She mentions in the book that, you know, her instinct is to never say anything bad about her family. And I definitely understand that. I definitely, you know, you want to protect sort of the purity of your memories. And part of that is sort of looking back with rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the truth of it is nobody's perfect.
Right. And so her parents separate, but like never really divorce, or it takes a long while.
Yeah, she said people in Nevis had a tendency to not divorce, and some people would live apart their entire lives.
Right. And she has a couple siblings.
As children, there were 3 of us. We were never introduced to the entertainment world as such. We spent most of our time in church. I played the organ, I played the piano, sang in the choir, taught Sunday school. So did my sister, Emily. My brother, of course, was able to sneak out and play marbles in the street.
You know, like I said, they're poor, but also when they go to church, they are put together. Mom is a seamstress, makes her and her sister matching clothes. She looks at her mom and sees this as like a regal woman. She just had this presence about her. Fast forward a little bit, you know, her mother has expectations for her to marry a religious man, someone who is a Christian boy, a good Christian boy. And she, by the time she's 17, she has met this boy who is like the son of a pastor, I believe. And I don't even know how to describe this. She does not know what sex is. She does not know how how babies are made.
It is a religious upbringing, and then also the education in that era, when it comes to things like sex education, are practically non-existent.
Right.
It's like, just don't.
Truly. I mean, and if you can, like, again, take your mind there, like, this was the mid-20s, you know? For Black people, specifically Black immigrants in New York City, she's dating this guy who she's like not really into, but her mom loves because he's the son of a pastor, preacher person. And sneaky guy that he is pulls her aside one day, and they have very quick sexual relations. She says they did not even lie down. They were standing up, and she had no idea that they were even having sex. I don't know. She doesn't describe it as sexual assault.
No,
but
she certainly doesn't, but it's
like she doesn't even understand. Like, I don't know if you don't understand what's happening, can you really consent to something like that?
Right.
Like, I think it's not. I do think this guy was taking advantage of her. He was a little bit older. Obviously knew what the fuck he was doing. But anyway, she has sex, and lo and behold, she gets pregnant. And so all of a sudden, she is this big shame of her family, her siblings, who she kind of thought were like, I don't know, I don't want to say fuck ups, but like certainly more wild than her. They end up being the more traditional. And she's like, oh shit, I have a baby and I'm 17. She doesn't get to graduate from high school. She ends up getting
4 weeks from graduating from high school. She's told she is not allowed to graduate. She has to get a job. She starts going to night school to support, and she eventually does graduate high school, but it takes her all of this extra time just because
the school was a religious school, and they did not, once they found out she had a child, they were like, I don't think so, honey. And she gets married. That's right.
She marries this man. As soon as her mother finds out that she's pregnant, she gets forced into marrying this man.
She gets forced into this marriage, and very quickly she's like, you know what? Nah.
Yeah. And I, honestly, I know we're like not even into her film career yet, but I think this is sort of the origin of like her strength. Is she decides after 2 years, I'm done. I'm not having it. She packs up the baby, she packs up her stuff, and she leaves, and she never speaks to this man again.
Yeah, truly. Never. She said, okay, bye. This is something, her film career fully does not start until she is 30 years old. And 30 years old and not even like really looking for this type of
No.
work. She was not, hustling in New York to like, build a portfolio or make connections for acting like so many of the other subjects we've had. She was, doing something else that we'll get into, but it just reminds me, and is something that I love hearing, that like people find their bliss and true calling at all ages. And so if Cicely Tyson can fucking strike gold at 30 years old, so can you. Okay?
Absolutely.
So Cicely, I thought this was like the craziest story she told in the book. Not the craziest, but one of the craziest. She's like, this guy just like, I don't know, like said, hey, should you be a model? And Cicely's like, what? Me? No, stop.
I am a firm believer in divine guidance. And consequently, I don't think it's something I chose to do, but that I was chosen to do. I was simply walking along the street one day, and someone stopped me and asked me whether or not I was a model. And I wasn't. I was working as a secretary at the time. And he said, if you aren't, you should be. And I said, how do you do that? Well, you register at a school, and you get a certificate, and then you make the rounds of the various modeling agencies, and someone will sign you.
So she just like, blip, 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 looks in the phone book, calls up, I believe, the first African-American modeling agency, goes. They immediately fall in love with her. They're like, yes, queen. They start printing a bunch of pictures of her to send her out on jobs. She pretty quickly starts getting gigs. She's on the cover of Ebony magazine. She's on the cover of, there was like, it's not Family Circle, but it's like very Family Circle.
Yeah. But while she's doing this, she's promising her mom, listen, I'm not gonna give up my job. I'm gonna work. I have a child to take care of. I do real
She's
quick when I
still a typist.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. She can do over 100 words per minute, which, by the way, is really impressive because I don't think I can do 5 words in a minute. But I do want to mention, when it comes to her kid, we're not really going to talk about her kid that much. In the book, she gives her child the pseudonym Joan, and she explains when her child was a baby, she had to share her with the world. And so her gift back to her when she was older was the ability to spend as much time with her as she possibly could, and her privacy.
Yeah.
So pretty much we're probably not going to mention Joan very much, other than she did eventually, once she started making money with this modeling and the law clerking job, the typist job, she was able to send her daughter upstate to a school and pay for a private school. Mm-hmm. And it's something that she both is very proud of and also kind of regrets, because she missed a large portion of her child's childhood.
Yeah, totally. So she is, going on modeling gigs, and it's in 1956 or thereabouts. She gets noticed by this guy who's like, oh, hey, we're doing a movie and you look exactly like the character we want. And that's the movie's Carib Gold.
Well, it becomes Carib Gold. There's another film that falls through, but...
Oh, right. But so Carib Gold, I watched a little bit of it. The music's fun.
I watched the full thing because it's all available on YouTube, and it's like maybe just a little over an hour. And the things that stuck out to me, just real quick, is it's a majorly black cast.
Yep.
It is not a film that treats the black characters like, oh, you're a separate class of people. It's kind of like it's a B movie. It's about a ship that finds gold. And the sort of like drama that ensues when one person gets too greedy. And there's like a voodoo scene, but I actually think it was handled pretty decently because it wasn't treated like, oh, there's magic spells going on. It was just treated as a ritual. But
wasn't the movie made by a man who was trying to create a black, like, not a black studio, essentially? He wanted to make black movies in a black studio. That did not pan out.
Now, all we got to do is chip in.
Oh, I see.
No, baby, you don't see. Dottie, listen, we're gonna have it back 100 times in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
But, baby, then you're gonna have that operation with a private room even.
Sure, Bob. And it'll be a success. And we'll have kids. We'll have all the kids we want. We'll have so blooming many kids you won't be able to find a place to walk in the house.
This is where it becomes tough for me. As you mentioned up front, neither of us are black. I am white. Louie is not. And so I never want to be in the position where hopefully it all comes across that I'm not centering myself as a white person in a story about racism. I'm just imparting it and letting you know that I understand and should be speaking about it, but not making it about me. But you are going to hear us talk about racism a whole fucking lot because she ends up, you know, if the Hollywood system had not been as segregated as it is, as awful as it is for people of color, we would have so many more Cicely Tyson films. Yeah. She would have had so many more opportunities.
Absolutely.
She would have been paid more. And it's not that we don't remember her as an icon, because we do, but she would have had so many more opportunities to prove exactly how good she is, and she just didn't get them.
Right. When you think about, you know, Glenn Close or Meryl Streep, they have libraries of works to go through. Like there's actually like levels of like, oh, that was a really shitty movie, that was a whatever movie, and that was a great movie. Cicely has, you know, a handful of movies, a handful more of TV stuff, TV movies, and that's literally just because of lack of opportunity.
It reminded me a lot of when we did our Rita Moreno episode, which recently has come up a lot. And I highly recommend you guys go listen to our Rita Moreno episode. Speaking of giving someone their flowers while they're still alive, you know, Rita Moreno wins the Academy Award for West Side Story and then doesn't act for 7 more years in film. Yeah. And that happens to Cicely Tyson, where, you know, she gets nominated for Sounder, and we'll get there. Don't worry. I know we're trying to go in chronological order. And she does Sounder, does basically a bunch of bit parts.
Yeah.
And then doesn't act for almost the entirety of the 80s.
Yeah, totally. Before we get to that, though,
she doesn't act in big screen films. I amend that.
Right.
Yeah. She does a ton of TV. Yeah.
So she, you know, is like, why do you want me in this movie? Like, why do you want me? It's the 50s. She's being successful at modeling, is still typing. But she's like, you don't want me. I'm not an actor. Like, what the fuck?
And she said, listen, I have an interview scheduled for you this afternoon. It's for a movie. I said to her, I don't know anything about movies. Thank you very much, but I'm not going to go there and make a fool of myself. And she kept calling me. And I finally said to her, please don't call me anymore. You're going to make me lose my job. And I hung up the phone. She called me back and she said, just tell me you go over and see this man. He just wants to see you. I said, okay.
She realizes, oh, I want to not just jump in and do this. I want to do the work. And so she takes classes. She takes acting classes. I did not know this about her. She is a full method girl.
Yeah. I was shocked to find that out too, but she is literally like, don't talk to me.
Yeah,
call me by my character's name.
Yeah.
Like, would she get home, she would like close herself in her room and like live
as
sort of in the
person.
mindset of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So she had small roles, you know, after Carib Gold. And in Carib Gold, she's not a big part of it. She's a wife character.
I do want to briefly mention, when she is sent to her acting classes, the first person they send her to is Stanislavski. You've heard us mention the name before, I believe, both in our Jane Fonda episode and in the Sally Field episode. Very famous, very, like, everybody trained under him. And she's like, I don't want to be with celebrities. I'm new at this. I don't want to. And the first person they put her in class with is fucking Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
And by the way, too, I do want to mention one of my favorite stories of the book is at the time she has like the little pixie bob because it's what's popular because of Audrey Hepburn, and her family keeps calling her Black Audrey, which I love. But she like sees Marilyn Monroe and she's like, no.
She's like, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And she decides to like basically eject herself from this acting class to go work in a smaller, more
101.
Yeah, and I don't blame her, but I just think it's really like this is a person who knows themselves. It's just like Marilyn Monroe. Fuck no, like we're not doing this.
All of the big stars already established, Marilyn Monroe and people like that. And I looked up one day and there she was sitting next to me, and I said, I don't belong here. So I stopped going. They called me and asked me why I was not attending classes. And I said, because you put me with a group of professionals. I'm not a professional. I'm a beginner, and I like learning things from the ground up.
She's like, I gotta do the work.
Yeah. And so she has like these like little bit parts in these like tiny little movies. What really happens, and I think it's because she is, in New York City, she enters the world of theater. In the early 60s, she appears in The Blacks, which is a very famous show that had Maya Angelou in it, James Earl Jones in it. It was like this generation of Black theater actors and an opportunity for them to play in a show about Black people, for Black people. And it was like, the longest running off-Broadway show that was not a musical at the time?
Yes. It ran for 1,408 performances, which is so many performances.
Yeah, truly. And so she talks a lot in the book about hanging out with her castmates. She was rubbing elbows, with, literally Maya Angelou. But then just meeting folks in New York. She has this great story just being like, oh, I went to this like little Italian restaurant called Sardi's. I was like, shut up.
Just small.
Yeah, small little thing. And so she's beginning to realize, oh, I like this. I want to do this, and I want to be an actress. She tells her mother, and her mother is like, not on my watch.
Yeah.
Mom is very unsupportive.
My mother, I don't know what she wanted me to be. She thought that I was going to live in a den of iniquity, because we grew up in the slums, okay? Lots of prostitutes walking up and down the street. And that's all she knew about movies.
This is the type of mother that like tried to raise her children in the church and tried to raise them in music and wanted her daughters to marry pastors' sons. When we see how that turned out. Mm-hmm. And so for her to come in and be like, hey, I want to, give up this thing that I'm making money and I'm doing, and to do, what her mother saw as frivolity.
Yes,
she's
but
like,
not just frivolity, but like sinful frivolity.
Yeah.
Like acting a fool for people. And truly, I can understand, because a lot of Black roles at the time, and I think for her career also, were, playing servants, playing maids, slave, like all that shit. I understand that. And I certainly think there are people out there who are like, don't fucking take those roles. Those roles suck. And we don't want to project that. And then the opposite end of it is like, well, I need to work somehow, So it's a very tenuous situation, but she is adamant that this is what she wants to do, and she's having a great time doing it with these other really creative icons on the rise. And so she continues doing it. She tells a story how she finally invited her mom to come see her do a show at the Harlem Y or something. And mom shows up and is very just like nooch the entire time. But then once the curtain opens and sees her, something clicks, something changes. And I don't want to say changes, but she kind of understands it a little bit more.
Right. She comes around as much as somebody that's that sort of reserved can.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes. I guess like the next thing, she's doing a lot of theater, things come, things go. The next thing that is really notable is her hair moment on TV.
Yes.
She gets cast in an episode of, is it East Side, West Side?
Yes.
And she she talks about this a lot, how she has to inhabit the character. She has to know them. She has to like live inside of them. And I think that's part of like her method. She loves like the training. She loves like learning about everything about this person.
And one of the other things I like about her too, she's a little bit of a spoiler. She's like, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna do my thing, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. And the hair thing is a great example because, as you mentioned, she gets cast in East Side, West Side, and she goes to a salon and she has them shave her hair down to a very small fro.
Yeah,
just very close to her skull,
very tight, natural hair. And she shows up on set and they're like...
She's wearing a scarf.
Yeah.
And then when the director said places, I took the scarf off. You could hear a hair hit the floor. So finally he walked up to me and he said, Cicely, you cut your hair. And I sheepishly held my head and I shook my head, yes. So he said, I wanted to ask you to do that, but I didn't have the nerve.
At that time, natural hair on black women was just not seen on TV.
Absolutely not. You either, because once again, Hollywood is a racist industry, you either wore wigs or you spent hours conditioning your hair and straightening it.
Yeah, painful.
Very painful.
Chemicals in your hair, in your scalp. And she, inspires a movement of natural hair amongst black women across the country. I think, doesn't she say that the CBS is getting letters from salons who are saying they're losing money from all the customers who don't want their hair relaxed anymore?
And it's funny because she never intended that to be the case. She was just wanting to be this character and couldn't find any other way for this person to physically express this thing that was so important to her.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that's really bold and fascinating and shows not only a dedication to her work, but a dedication to her humanity.
But every time I changed the hairdo, it had not to do with me. It had to do with authenticating the character that I was playing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like her humanity is what has made her the icon she is today, and we'll get into it as we kind of mature into her career. But that principle is just in everything she does, is being this human and serving others. Before her star completely explodes in the last part of the 60s, she's on The Guiding Light a little bit.
Which her mother loved. Her mother was very into the stories.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think worth mentioning is 1966, she does A Man Called Adam, which is a fun little movie.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And I was also shocked because you forget that sometimes movies don't wait for history to have a resolution. Mm-hmm. And so her character in this film, she plays opposite Sammy Davis Jr., who is a drug addicted trumpet player, and this movie also has Frank Sinatra Jr. in it, and it has Louis Armstrong, so it's filled with classic stable of people, but she plays a freedom rider in that movie. And I was like, oh yeah, history is happening at this time.
Truly. The movie is basically this freedom rider who's in New York, and then New York is swinging and popping off, not really engaged, I would say, in the civil rights movement. People there are just, not people there, but the people she's find herself around are just oh, protesting, who cares? Let's have fun. Which also, so this is also maybe a good time to bring in, she had met Miles Davis in the 60s with, just around New York, and she had kind of a little dalliance here, a little this, a little that, that would have turned into a decades-long on and off Katy Perry hot and cold situation that will,
Yeah, Louie and I had a conversation about that, and he'll come back up, but it just seems
bad.
It seems bad. Yeah, it's the one part of her story I'm just oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, Miles Davis was a iconic, again, musician
jazz trumpeter.
Yeah, and he would, I mean, not unlike A Man Called Adam, you know, like not unlike the character in that movie, who is he's just this genius musician who, according to Cicely, just didn't like himself all that much and found himself more often than not knee deep in addiction and self-destructive behavior. Also had a taste for women that was just, you know, also self-destructive, insatiable.
When he meets Cicely in 1967, he's in the process of getting divorced from his wife, Frances Davis. Mm-hmm. And he ends up using Cicely's picture image for his album Sorcerer in 1967. The divorce is finalized in 1968. He tells the press, I'm going to marry Cicely Tyson. And what does he do? He fucking turns around and marries a singer named Betty Davis. No relation.
Yes.
That September. And she, like, essentially cuts him off for a decade.
Yeah. So
she's
Betty
like, I'm out.
Betty Davis was also a famous musician in her own right. Yeah. And they had a very rocky relationship. They were married for a year. It was 1968, divorced in 1969. But while that's happening, oh my God, Gavin, I cannot even believe we have not brought up Cicely Tyson's Sixth Sense.
Ah, yes.
So, as we mentioned, grew up very religious, but also on top of that, she talks a lot about how she has just this special extra sensory something. She labels it ESP, kind of. She's very into signs, her dreams are very, you know, telling.
Prophetic.
Yes, prophetic even. She tells a story about how she sees the ghost of her aunt.
I didn't like it. I was beginning to think that something was radically wrong. And it was my cousin. He was a psychologist. He said, let's go for a walk. He took me to a bookstore and he bought me all of these books. And he said to me, we all have it. Some more developed than others. And
this is like for her entire life. She, you know, has feelings about when Miles is in danger, has feelings about, you know, I saw someone in a dream and something's wrong with them. I can't do this until I figure this out. So, and she, and that feeling also kind of applies to her acting though, because she says, I would never take a role unless I had this feeling inside me, this she would get goosebumps. Oh, yeah. And that was meant that she had to take the role. But if her stomach was feeling bad, she knew she couldn't do the role at all.
I do want to mention too, this is a force or a gift that she turned her back on for many years too. She said she was scared of it, and it really wasn't until she got a call from Don Shirley, who is, you know, he was a cousin of her father, but he was also a jazz pianist and composer. They made the movie Green Book about him. Don't see Green Book.
Yes. Yes.
Just avoid Green Book.
Don't see Green Book, but just know that she was, you know, has this connection to this other iconic black man in like civil rights history.
Yes, and he had 2 honorary doctorates. People called him Dr. Shirley. He was very into psychology, and he was the one who introduced her to maybe this is a sixth sense. Yeah. Maybe this is something you should be paying more attention to. Maybe it's not just intuition. Maybe it is a psychic ability, and you should give it...
Embrace it.
Yes, absolutely.
She said that as she learned and she put a name to it, because before she would like have panic attacks and like freak out like, oh my God, what am I seeing? So, canon, Cicely Tyson is a witch.
But a good Christian witch.
A good Christian witch. Also, speaking of connections, I did not know that her godson is Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah, I did know that. That was one of the weird, like, pieces of trivia that's in the back of my brain somewhere. In
the book, she just like has all these connections to like these incredible, talented black people who are just like all over. But anyway. So moving into the 70s is when she really pops off. She really is having a moment. She moves to LA and she ends up living with her agent.
And his wife.
Yeah.
And his wife was kind of like
okay.
Oh, okay.
And they have like a young child, don't they? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like it's like the Hollywood star in the basement. I don't know.
Yeah, but they all become good friends, and it's not like his wife is like, get this woman out of my house. They
Right.
eventually,
Right. So in the early 70s, she gets a script for the movie Sounder. Sounder was a children's book. Sounder is a dog. It's the dog of this black family. I want to say like post World War II. They're sharecroppers.
Yes.
And they ask her to read for the role of the teacher, and she's like, I don't think so. I want to be the lead woman, Rebecca. She's the wife of the main character. And they're like, I don't know. And she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna just like let you pray on that because I know that this is my role. And so she kind of walks away from, the audition process and just says, I know that this is my role and it's gonna come to me. And guess what? She does her witchy magic and they call her back and say, the role is yours. Apparently they were trying to get someone else. This other person wanted more money.
And they both looked at each other, and then they looked at me, and they said, you are too young, you're too pretty, you're too sexy to play Rebecca. And I said, but I am an actress, and I would like the opportunity to play Rebecca.
She gets paid nothing to do these roles, like pennies.
And this is a lead role.
Yeah. It's a lead role and this would have been her first big time movie. And so she gets it. They go down to Louisiana where they film it. Sounder is about a black family where the patriarch is thrown in jail because he steals some food for his family because they literally have nothing to eat. So he's trying to provide for his family. And the movie is basically, this Rebecca asks her son to go find where the father is, and
he's in a work prison camp too. He's not just put into prison.
Right.
He is being forced to break rocks.
Right, a work prison camp, and they don't know which one or where. And so it's kind of the story of this mother keeping the family together, and also this young boy trying to find their father.
And another thing. With Nathan in jail and all, how you gonna crop for me when the spring season comes? Huh? Damn it, I'm talking to you, woman. I got a farm to worry about and I need some answers.
Cropping season is a long way off, Mr. Perky. By that time, Nathan ought to be home. If he ain't, believe me, the children and me will do the cropping. We have to. Because we owe you all that money. Mr. Perkin?
I do want to say this is a movie that came up a lot, like in my orbit. And I was always like, I don't want to watch a movie because when I was a kid, this was one of those books that was always optionally offered in like junior high. And it was about a fucking dog. And I was like, I don't want to read. But I do like the fact that Lonnie Elder III, who wrote the script, felt the same way. And was like, I'm not going to write you a movie about a dog. I want to write about this family who is having trouble in their daily survival. And that's really what the film is about.
Right. And so she, does this movie and surprise, as the studio is getting ready to release it, they're realizing that they have a fucking whopper of a performance in Cicely here. And they decide to make her the first billed star and not her co-star, who is
Paul Winfield,
who she was dating at the time.
Yeah.
Her and Paul Winfield, I mean, she says, romances on screen are so easily spilled over into her life and that he was such a sweet man. Very low drama, didn't really turn into anything, but...
Yeah, and she ends up even acting with him again later, and we'll get to that. But...
Right. But he says, congratulations, you deserve this. And she's kind of flabbergasted, but she gets an Academy Award nomination, a Golden Globe, a BAFTA nomination. It's seemingly all happening. As she was leaving LA, a friend had told her, like, you're going to be at the Oscars one day. It's going to happen. And she's like, oh, no. And turns out he was right.
Yeah.
And she I think called him and escorted her to the Oscars. when she was nominated that year, she eventually lost to Liza Minnelli from Cabaret.
Yeah, both her and Paul Winfield are nominated in their separate acting categories.
Yes.
It's the first time in the Oscars history that both black leads in a film were nominated for the highest acting honor. Her and Diana Ross are both nominated for Best Actress. So it's a pretty good year. And in the novel, she's like, well, Liza Minnelli was the daughter of Vincent Minnelli.
Yeah.
And she's the daughter
of Judy. And they never had one.
And I was like, okay, but also Liza's pretty good. And like, I like Cabaret.
Yeah, it's not like it wasn't some shitty little role.
Yeah, it's not like a questionable, like how did she win that?
Right,
yeah.
Right. She gets all these accolades. You know, the movie didn't make a big splash, but when they realized that the reviews were so great, they pumped a bunch of money in there. The movie ended up making, some money, and she is kind of on this big upswing. In 1974, she received this next big role, like the next big thing in her life, which was the Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, which is just like a stunner of a movie.
Yeah, it's funny. She read the book and she really wanted this, and they thought it was going to be big screen picture, but it ends up at CBS, and CBS really pushed for it. But she was convinced, the novel is by Ernest J. Gaines, and she was convinced Jane Pittman was a real person.
Yeah.
And she's not.
A lot of people think she's real.
She is a stand-in for a lot of the trauma that we've placed on black people since the creation of the United States of America. This is a CBS movie. It airs with only one commercial break, which happens right at the beginning of the film.
Right.
And you can watch this movie on HBO Max. It feels... I will say there's a quality of TV films from the 70s, and you also have to understand that this was the first TV movie, and we'll get to Roots because she's in Roots, but this was the first TV movie to really address slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was like such a big swing, and she says that it was like a certain young producer at CBS who really championed the movie, because a lot of people were just like, we're not going to fucking touch that. Are you kidding me? This is also the time, and I think this is very important to talk about. She talks about how blaxploitation films were at their peak, and she just did not care for them at all.
Yeah, and I think she has a lot of really interesting and good things to say, but I do I disagree with her as much as I can as a white person, but like I do disagree with the fact that, like, I don't know. I think if you asked Melvin Van Peebles, who did Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, the film that he was creating wasn't just trash in an attempt to reinforce black stereotypes and whatnot. And I do think there's blaxploitation was seized upon by white producers, and a lot of it was turned into that. But I do think there are some gems in there. And I would argue that actually some of the movies she then makes in the 70s are also just a tiny bit blaxploitation. But I get what she's saying, because she, what she's specifically talking about is a lot of them do reinforce negative stereotypes. A lot of them are about violence. They're about people living on the streets. They're about drugs. They're about, the stereotype of the unwed mother. And I definitely get that. But I when I was reading the book, I was like, she's being real harsh on, she's kind of lumping all blaxploitation together. And I don't think that's completely fair.
Right.
But,
I mean, and I imagine that, what she's talking about is, she's like, I'm an educated woman. I do not connect with that experience, and I'm not going to portray that experience. And she talks about how Sounder and Jane Pittman, like, these are movies that were not in vogue for black theater goers. After the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the want and the feeling of these, like, nice, happy movies about black people, it was kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? Like no. And she was very, she held that very near and dear to her. She did not want to make movies that were going to portray black people in, a negative light. But I also think, like, this is a very classic, Christian, especially, religious woman who's like, I'm not. Later, she does a movie with Richard Pryor, and she's like, even doing that, she was like, "You want me to do a movie with who?" Like,
yeah,
what?
That man swears too much.
Yeah,
like I love that was the
literally. But anyway,
before we move out of Autobiography, Miss Jane Pittman, I do want to mention, by the way, too, it is an incredible acting feat. She portrays Jane Pittman from the age of 23 until the age of 110. There is very realistic special makeup effects that were designed by Stan Winston and carried out on her by both Stan Winston and Rick Baker, who are two of the most famous makeup artists in terms of special effects makeup in the history of film. But Rick Baker, unfortunately, couldn't be credited due to rules about
the union.
Yeah, union rules. But there's very few times in film history that Rick Baker and Stan Winston work together, and so I think it's cool to mention that. But I was shocked when I watched this movie. I was like, this makeup is so good.
The makeup is
like
stunning,
authentic,
and she is just like she was. Oh, also forgot to tell you guys, they fully ask her at the beginning of her career, like, how old are you? And she's like, well, I'm 30. And they're like, no. And let's just tell everyone you're 20. And literally for, I want to say, 80% of her career, not that people, I guess, asked, but like, people thought she was 10 years younger than she actually was. For 80% of her career. It wasn't until way later.
Yeah. Essentially what she did Trip to Bountiful, when everybody was like, wow, this woman in her 70s. And she's like, correction, 80.
Actually, I'm 80, yeah. So she's getting showered with, awards, adoration.
Yeah, Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. She ends up winning a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress and a special Emmy Award for Actress of the Year, which like they never do.
Literally never.
She also was nominated for a BAFTA award for the movie, which once again is like a thing because BAFTAs are British Oscars. So
yeah. It's very wild. And, so for the rest, the 70s are really the peak, I would say, for her career. She, does Pittman. A couple years later is when she does Roots.
Yeah, she's in the first part of Roots. She plays Kunta Kinte's mother, Binta. I
watched that first part. I was like, I'm not watching.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a long, long thing. But also, again, I can't stress this enough. There's a reason why for Black Americans, she is the icon legend that she is, because she's in these like seminal, groundbreaking touchstones of Black movie making.
No matter where I go in the world, they will say to me, Roots. I know what I did. They will always say, Roots. I had been to Dahomey, Africa. I had an opportunity to get a feel of the country itself, made lots of notes, taped the dialogue, just wanting to get to know who my forefathers were.
The next thing she does in 1978 is she appears in the miniseries King. It's a 3-night event. She plays Coretta Scott King. It's so interesting to watch her version of Coretta Scott King and compare it to Angela Bassett's version of Coretta Scott King in Betty and Coretta. Because I don't know, they were just so different.
They're very different.
I kind of loved seeing that in a way. And for that, she's nominated for an Emmy Award for Lead Actress. So yeah, she's certainly getting her notices.
Right. And again, like this is all she talks about when she was doing the rounds for Sounder. She was doing a lot of press, and
oh my God,
people were like, so I just didn't really find it believable, like the relationship between the two leads, like this happy married Black couple. I just don't get it. And
yeah, it's literally a reporter said to her, like, oh, I don't believe that Black people can love each other that way.
Right.
That fucking destroyed me, because it's so hard for me to understand and know from the way that I was raised that anybody could treat another human being like they weren't human.
Right. The level,
it's frustrating and scary and sad.
Yeah. The level of ignorance and like gall and just like toxicity for someone to say that is fucking wild. And that has such a profound effect on Cicely and her career.
She actually says in her book, and this is a direct quote from Cicely, "The lie of black inferiority was built right into America's infrastructure, and to this day, that framework remains stubbornly intact."
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. It's like you said, it's so frustrating to think about. Like, this was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
This wasn't 200 years ago. This was
correct
within, a little before our lifetime, essentially. I do also want to point out there's another great passage in her book that I marked off, and I really tried to push it in the Spike Lee episode, but it was nice to hear somebody else say it and feel the same way, which is, and this is once again a direct quote, "What some white folks never seem to understand is that we're not a monolithic group. While there are certainly rich cultural traditions that bind us together, there is no singular, quote, African-American experience, just as there is no one way to be black. There are as many viewpoints as there are glorious black faces." And I don't know, I think that's such an important, because it is sort of, like I said, I mentioned in the Spike Lee episode, anytime anybody interviews him, they expect him to answer for the entirety of every black person in the United States, for every black person in the world. And, to be Cicely Tyson, to be sitting in front of this cavalcade of reporters and to have them say things like that, or the other reporter that said to her, he didn't realize when this little boy in Sounder called his father daddy, he was like, that's what my son calls me. Yeah. And he just couldn't, his brain was so broken by how we teach people in the United States that he couldn't imagine black people having the same feelings white people have. Right.
To call a father daddy, and that is like, gets to the root of like, I mean, God, black men are treated like shit also, like especially young black men, and this was like a 9-year-old 10-year-old in this movie showing empathy and love like to his parent. Like, wow, shocking. And that truly is like, we don't see that often still today. And that's the backdrop for her not wanting to be in these blaxploitation films. She gets offered tons of them and she says no, I'm not going to do that. Because if she's already getting questions from, the LA Times and everyone about, do black people love each other? Like, what the fuck? Like, Yeah. And on top of that, she was reared on the theater. She was best friends with fucking Maya Angelou and all these titans of the era. It's like she said, I know what I have to do in my career. I know what I'm being called to do. And it was a very specific thing. And literally, it's like when you look at her filmography, it's like, Harriet Tubman, Coretta Scott King, all these women who were forces for good for black people.
And even to a smaller extent, and we're going to be moving on now further into her career, but even the smaller things, like you mentioned Bustin' Loose with Richard Pryor, where she plays a teacher, or she does the Marva Collins story on TV, which is also about a teacher. She does the River Niger, which is about a put upon mother. She does all these sort of what you would consider, I guess, quote unquote, message films. But what she's doing is she's sort of putting her work where her convictions are.
I don't look for anything or ask for anything other than to be treated like a human being. That's all.
Yeah. The River Niger was such an interesting, stylish,
I fucking loved it.
I'm also seeing just James Earl Jones, just at the prime of his life, really being funny. This is the 70s, this is her life in the 70s. Also, going into the 80s, Miles Davis reappears.
Yes.
They had always kind of kept tabs on each other, knew what was going on. He is constantly just showing up to her hotels and apartments, wasted, asking her to come back to him. It's very tumultuous, very not good. He has this daughter who is basically friends with Cicely at this point, and who is like, do you know where my dad is? And she is like, no, sorry. It's very hard. But through all this, in 1981, she even says he wore me down.
Yeah, and she basically cleans him up as much as she can, as much as she thinks she's able to get him off of things.
Right, and they get married. She says that he was the shell of who he used to be. His body was failing him, truly. Yeah. Like, a lot of their marriage, I think, and she says this, so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, she wanted to fix him. Like, plain and simple, she wanted someone to take care of. She wanted to fix him. And, I think one of the interesting parts of the book is she makes these, like, nice big parallels between her father and her mother and her and Miles and their relationship and kind of the brokenness of it, but how they couldn't give each other up. And how she and her mom were in these very difficult, tragic relationships, but were still such proud, never going to be beaten down women. They're married from 81, I think, until 89. So they're made for the 80s, essentially. During the 80s, she's not working too much. I think also at this point, she says, I was getting paid nothing for the movies I was making in the 70s. So to pay for bills and to raise her child, she's going on speaking engagements. She's talking at college campuses, using her platform to spread the word about, discrimination, racism, talking about the Vietnam War. Like, she is literally on her own circuit of spreading the message of civil rights. And also at the same time, by the way, is, resuscitating literally Miles Davis.
Yeah.
The chapter about this specific time in her life is hard to hear, how the things that they had to do to clean him up.
And he was also abusive, and he was still cheating on her.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. It's bad.
It's very bad.
But, back to her career, in 89, Oprah asks her to appear in the adaptation of The Women of Brewster Place. She's a very small role in this miniseries. She appears back on the big screen in 91's Fried Green Tomatoes, where she plays Sipsy, Secrets in the Sauce.
Yeah, so we talked about Fried Green Tomatoes in our Kathy Bates episode.
Yeah, it was my 5-star review for Kathy Bates. I love Fried Green Tomatoes.
It's all right, honey. Let it go. Let it go. Miss Ruth was a lady. And a lady always knows when to leave.
She's still doing TV. She tries getting into the television series role in 94 to 95. She does Sweet Justice. But that doesn't last for more than a year. But in 97, she does Hoodlum, which I watched for the Queen Latifah episode. And really that's basically rounds out her like big screen career in the 90s.
Right.
And it's really not until 2005 because of Winn-Dixie where she really comes back to the big screen. Right.
I mean, it's for me, like the winter of her life is how she would say it. She's not getting a lot of roles. They're not coming. But in the mid-aughts, I would say, she meets Tyler Perry.
Yeah.
And Tyler Perry is a huge part of her, the last season of her life and her career, for better or for worse. I think we have talked about Tyler Perry before on this podcast.
Yeah. We both have strong feelings.
We have strong feelings. I have said before that I think his movies have a time and a place. I think that they are, one, not made for people like me and Gavin. Two, does not inoculate them from criticism. And
Yes.
three, I think she found like this, I don't want to say kindred spirit, but a good friend in Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely.
She saw a man who grew up in poverty and had built a place for Black actors to come together and work. And
I do want to say, it's not like neither of us believes Tyler Perry's a generous person. He's proved time and time again he is a generous person. He gives back, and he has created a film industry for Black people and employed so many Black people. So like, that's not the issue. Just getting that out there.
Right. And so, and they're also both religious people. So they both connect on this, spiritual level. And she talks very fondly and kindly about him. And I believe they did have a very special relationship. I will say Diary of a Mad Black Woman is a crazy movie, but she is very good in it. You're
being nice.
I posted a little stories to our Instagram when I was watching it. But oh my God, Kimberly Elise, when we talked about Beloved, I think she's excellent. I think she's so fucking good.
Oh, she's very good. I just feel bad that she's saying a lot of that dialogue.
I know, yeah. I mean, it only kind of works because it's Kimberly Elise, and she's one of the most underutilized actresses I think we have. Cicely Tyson plays her mother in this movie.
And she does she gets notices for it. She gets nominated for the BET Comedy Awards for Outstanding Supporting Actress, the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress. So it's not like these roles are going unnoticed.
Right. And I want to mention that I think she's very funny.
Yes.
In Bustin' Loose, she plays a straight character, but she is funny. And in this movie, one of the Joe, I don't know, he's like, come over here. He's basically hitting on her. And, he says, hey, I've got Viagra. And she goes, oh, I have mace. It's so good.
No, she's very good. And it's one of those things where you realize she's older, but she certainly hasn't missed a step.
No, absolutely not. In total, she does 6 movies with Tyler Perry from 2005 till her death. The next big thing she does, I would say, is The Help. And that was in 2011. She plays Constantine, she's basically the maid that raised Emma Stone's character.
Yeah, she sort of sparks the issue for Emma Stone,
right?
In order to center herself into a bunch of Black people's stories. That helps bad guys.
What's interesting to me is that she's very good in this.
She really is.
I think she has a way of transforming her entire being. When you see interviews of her and you see her on red carpets, she is just this majestic bird. When she's in these movies, from Pittman to The Help, she changes her voice. She changes her body. It's unreal, the things that she's able to do and find. And she says that it just comes to her. She does all this research and work, and she just kind of, will find the body of this person. Did she say in Sounder she thought that Rebecca was left-handed?
Yeah.
So she...
And on top of that, the young actor playing her son was actually left-handed. So she was it's secret.
She's like, see, I'm psychic.
ESP, got it going on.
It's happening. So I think she's very good in The Help. She does say, that was when she met Viola Davis.
Yeah.
And both her and Viola have talked about how as soon as they met each other, Viola just wrapped her in her arms and started crying because she had been a inspiration for her entire life. Seeing her in East Side, West Side with her natural hair.
And then seeing her in the Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman was really what did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this full circle moment of them being together in this movie, I think, Cicely has said, I've always been wary of playing servants in The Help, but she thought that Constantine had a lot more story behind her, but agrees with Viola's later assessment that the movie is not focused enough on the Black women and their stories.
It falls short of what it's attempting to do. Yeah.
What you doing hiding out here, girl?
I just couldn't tell Mama I didn't get asked to the dance.
It's all right. Some things we just got to keep to ourselves, right?
boys say I'm ugly. Mama was third runner-up in the Miss South Carolina pageant. I wish you'd quit feeling sorry for yourself. Now that's ugly.
She also, from there, Viola's like, hey, gal, why don't you come play my mama on How to Get Away with Murder? And she does for 6 seasons, and she gets nominated for a bunch of more fucking Emmys for that.
She basically gets nominated for, I want to say, 5 out of the 6 times that she would have been eligible.
Sounds about right. Yeah. So she's doing that. And by the way, she's doing that in 2014. She died this year, which is 2020. So she was like 89, 88. Like, this was a woman. And she said, she's like, what was I going to retire for? People retire then die.
I do want to point out one of the roles that she always wanted in her life was the lead in The Trip to Bountiful, which was a Horton Foote play. It was actually written for television, but it became a play, and they made a movie out of it in the 80s, and Geraldine Chaplin played the role, and so
won an Oscar for it, didn't she?
Yeah, and so it goes back to Broadway in 2013, and it's being produced by Horton Foote's daughter, and she calls Cicely up. She's like, my father really wanted you to play this role. Once again, ooh, psychic. Like,
right. Well, but also she had told
her
like
agent.
20, like when that movie came out in the 80s, the movie was all white, she saw the movie. Oh, and another thing I love, she said she loves going to the theater by herself. Just a middle of the day movie.
Yeah, which she didn't for years, because she saw King Kong at a young age and it scared the shit out of her, and she didn't step foot into another movie theater until the premiere of Sounder, by the way. But then after that, she was cool. Yeah.
After that, she was like, I'm here, it's fine. But she told her agent, find me my Trip to Bountiful. I want a role like that. Fast forward to 2013. She gets a phone call from this producer who's like, my dad wanted you to be in this all black revival of the show. And she's like, okay, my spell worked.
and it's, it ends up being a huge hit. She does it. She does some crazy number of performances that I cannot think of off the top of my head. And I'm so sorry. But it's a great cast too. It's her and Cuba Gooding Jr., Condola Rashad, Vanessa Williams. Lifetime goes on to make it into a TV movie. Vanessa Williams from the cast ends up staying. Blair Underwood takes over for Cuba Gooding Jr. Keke Palmer takes over for Condola Rashad. And what's great too is she is able to finally, it basically in this role all comes full circle, because not only does she get to play this role that she was always wanted to play, but one of the things that's written into the play is this hymn that her mother loves and used to sing, and she has to sing it on stage, and it all is just it's like the goal at the end of the road for her, essentially.
Yeah, there's a on Broadway.com or whatever, there's a clip of her in the show. And it's so special and it's so good.
Everything seemed to work out today. Why is it some days everything works out and some days nothing works out? Huh? I guess the good Lord is with me today. I wonder why the Lord isn't with us every day. It would be so nice if he was, no? Yeah. Maybe then we wouldn't appreciate so much the days when he's on our side. Or maybe he's always on our side, we just don't even know it, huh? Maybe I had to wait 20 years cooped up in that city before I could appreciate getting back here.
Again, you can see this transformation. She becomes the oldest Tony Award winner.
Yeah.
She wins the Tony for The Trip to Bountiful.
It's been 30 years since I stood on the stage. I really didn't think it would happen again in my lifetime. And I was pretty comfortable with that, except that I had this burning desire to do just one more great role. I said I didn't want to be greedy. I just wanted one more. I
don't think the TV movie's bad.
No, not at all. But it's sort of inert. if you ask
Right.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit sapped of like specialness. Especially when you look at that clip, it's like you can see the energy and see the spirit kind of radiating off of her. And I truly do think like she's a theater person at heart.
Yeah.
It's kind of clear. She's like has that like sparkling live energy. Maybe it's, I don't know, her witchiness, that psychic energy coming off of her. But that's really, she does, she's at 88 when she does Trip to Bountiful. And she keeps working until, last week.
Yeah. I do want to point out a couple of other things that we didn't touch on right before we move into our picks. She is not only the godmother of Lenny Kravitz, she's also the godmother of Katya Washington, which is Denzel Washington's daughter, and Tyler Perry's son, Amon. She's a vegetarian. She has been a vegetarian basically since the 70s. Like,
yeah, she says she just eats her raw vegetables 3 times a day.
Absolutely. And I did want to mention there is a school that bears her name, the Cicely Tyson School of Performing and Fine Arts. It's a magnet school in East Orange, New Jersey. There's both a high school and a grade school, I believe. And it's funny because she talks about in the book them calling her up and being like, we want to name it after you. And her first reaction was, Dionne Warwick's from East Orange. Have you talked to her? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it's very clear that even before she passed last week, she had such a heavy impact, and not just on Hollywood and not just the people that would come after her, but on history.
Yeah, totally. And I was just looking up right now. Did she not also help found Dance Theater of Harlem?
She did. And she's a little salty that it's like erroneously never reported that she helped found it.
Right.
But
this is a woman who was dedicated to the arts, dedicated to Black people, and just service.
Yeah.
I was listening to her masterclass episode from Oprah, and she just says, at the end of the day, we are here in service of each other. And it just really touched my heart because, I don't know, she seems like such a, she says people thought she was difficult to work with on set. She had this attitude, la, la, la. But at the end of the day, like the things that she really cared about, I think for her, she has lots of great stories about, clashing with Elizabeth Taylor and, all these nonsense movies.
All the fun little gossipy things, but
all these nonsense movies where she was like, listen, if you aren't being professional, I'm not going to like fucking mess with this. Like, I'm getting paid too little with no respect to like fucking put up with this shit. But for the people that matter to her and like for the things that truly matter, I mean, God, the amount of time that she spends in the book talking about these kids at that high school and the school that bears her name, it's just so heartwarming and so touching. Like, this clearly was someone who loved and just wanted to serve. She said, I don't know, in the same way that like, I think we've talked about different subjects who their life is giving up to the craft. I don't think that was part of Cicely's life. I think Cicely's life was all about service. It was all about, like, because all of her craft came back to how, I'm going to put out the fucking 3-night MLK movie. Yeah, I'm going to do the story about the, like, 110-year-old Black woman like Harriet Tubman. We didn't even talk about the Harriet Tubman movie she does. Like, there are so many things. All of her life and all of the work she did was in service to the greater good. And to me, that's just so inspiring. And so it was very good to kind of take in all of her work and be like, damn, this is a woman from as soon as her career started, it was so unselfish. And we don't get that a lot from, of all the episodes we've done. I really can't think of someone who, has dedicated their career in the way that she has
to transforming the world through, just doing the thing.
She spends chapter of our book talking about how she tried to get some kid into a college. I was like, no one would do that.
And it's good that the world, while maybe didn't change as much as she would have liked, while she was alive, did give back to her. She has the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She's part of the Television Hall of Fame. She has a Career Achievement Peabody. She has an honorary Oscar. She's the first Black person to win the honorary Oscar, which I also think is nuts because it was awarded to her in 2018, 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's fucking psycho.
Or first Black woman, I should say. And yeah, I'm happy she was awarded, but she was never doing it for that. She was doing it for exactly the reasons you said. And I think that's extraordinary.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
And so why don't we move into our picks? Why don't we just get them out of the way? Just do it. No disrespect, but we got to do some 1-star reviews. It's the format of our show. So my 1-star review for Cicely Tyson, so sorry, Cicely, please forgive me, is 2012's Alex Cross. It's not a huge role, but it's better than some of the other movies that she was doing at the time, because let me tell you, there's a bunch of them from that period I could be like, woo, and not necessarily because of her, but because they weren't just, they were movies that she was making money off of. But Alex Cross is a reboot of the Alex Cross movies. Alex Cross is a detective character from the James Patterson novels. He was previously seen being played by Morgan Freeman in Kiss the Girls and Along Came a Spider. And this was really supposed to revitalize this film franchise. And essentially Alex Cross is a detective who's been offered a job profiling for the FBI, and it's sort of the last case he's going to do as a detective, and he's up against a serial killer terrorist who murders his wife with a sniper rifle, and so he goes out for revenge. And Cicely Tyson plays his mother in this film. Now, real quick before I fully get into the whole that aspect of it, I do want to mention James Patterson is white, and he has talked about the previous adaptations of his work, which basically he called out Hollywood on their racism, because what they did is Alex Cross is a young character in the books, and in the movies they cast Morgan Freeman, and what they were doing, he has said, is they were essentially neutering any sexual attention that Morgan Freeman would have with his white female co-stars, because in the novels he sleeps with a lot of the women that are
right.
And
it's the classic spy situation.
Yeah. And so they were basically getting rid of that. And so they decided to reboot the series with a young, sexy, and they go with Tyler Perry. And to me, that still sort of smacks a little bit of...
Did he have anything to do with this movie?
No, that he was basically just cast in it, to my knowledge. I don't think that he... no, I don't see his name as a producer. I do see James Patterson's name as producer. So, but it's based off the novel Cross by James Patterson. But part of me feels very much like, well, this is also just a tiny bit of Hollywood's racism by and apparently Idris Elba was attached first, and it's yes, okay,
hello,
yeah, that makes sense. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speak too much. I've made my feelings very clear on Tyler Perry, and this is not his production, so he doesn't have a ton of control of it. But he is the person who recommends that Cicely Tyson come in and play his mom. His mom, Regina Cross, also known as Nana Mama, which feels very much like something a white person would write for a black person to call their parents. And she's basically there to be I'm a tough old lady, and don't you do anything that would be bad. And so when he goes to get his revenge on Matthew Fox, famous woman abuser Matthew Fox, who plays the bad guy in this movie, she has to stop him and sort of be don't do anything that you'll regret and everything. And she talks about it in the book, and she says I'm this frail older woman, and I'm able to stop all 6 whatever height he is from. It doesn't come across on screen. It doesn't. It just feels it's very clear that he's somebody who has so much reverence for her, but the connection just isn't there. And it just feels like she's picking up a paycheck. And like, I don't blame her at that point in her life. Please pay that woman. But it wasn't fun to watch. And I didn't buy their relationship. And I frankly hated the film. And I feel bad because she's part of that. So my 1-star review has to go to 2012's Alex Cross.
You lost your wife, but you're still here. Your soul is alive in your body. You can't lose that too.
I'm not losing anything else. I'm going to deliver some justice.
Liar! 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 Don't you try placating me. You're gonna go out there and get yourself killed.
That ain't gonna happen.
I am gonna continue on the Tyler Perry train. And I'm so sorry because I didn't even realize this, but my 1-star review is 2020's A Fall from Grace.
A movie famously shot in 5 days for Netflix. Just putting that out there.
This is her last movie she ever did. And I mean, if I could, all together collectively, I don't think Tyler Perry's movies are great vehicles for her. Yeah. And even though, if I don't understand why Tyler Perry wouldn't go out of his way to, make a movie for her, as opposed to just, throwing her in these little tit-tat spots that, why would you waste her talent for that? Yeah. Doesn't seem...
Well, and that's exactly, even though he had very little to do with the actual production of Alex Cross, that's exactly what it felt like. It was why do this to her?
Right,
and that's what it felt like, something being done to her. It didn't feel like something she was actively participating in.
Right. She plays Alice in A Fall from Grace, and she's kind of a mysterious old senile woman, or seemingly senile woman, in the house of Felicia Rashad. The movie really is about this lawyer who's not good at her job, or thinks she's not good at her job. This movie is just so dumb. Imagine going all the way through law school, getting a job, and then being like, I can't do this. I'm bad at my job. I'm going to quit. It's like, what? You clearly made it through law school. If you don't like it, fine, but I'm sure you're fine at your job. Tyler Perry's also in this movie. All he does is sit in an office and yell. It's a mystery drama thriller thing where the guy from Supergirl is basically a con artist, and the movie is just so cheap. I could not believe.
Yeah, the first week it came out, by the way, and I've heard that they've corrected some of this, but the first week it came out, people were noticing editing errors. They were noticing boom mics in the frame. They were noticing cameramen in the reflections on it. Yeah.
Even I didn't notice boom mics and stuff, but I definitely noticed extras who were just standing around I don't know, being so fucking awkward and weird. It just looks so cheap. And it's kind of take the movie Ma, a fun romp that is out of this world, batshit crazy, but a really good time. Imagine that movie, but it's not a good time at all. That's A Fall from Grace. It's a twist and then a twist, but it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's in poor taste. It's
a lot of, and once again, I'm not turning this into a shitting on Tyler Perry, but I always feel because you bringing up the whole idea of her being a lawyer, going through law school, and just being that's what, when I watched Diary of a Mad Black Woman, it was frustrating to me that she loses her relationship with her husband and kicks her out, and she's like, oh, I've got to make money on my own. And the movie, she gets a job as a waitress, a job that my mother had proudly for years to pay for nursing school, and treats it like she's begging on the street, let alone that she's not waitressing in a diner. She's waitressing in a place with a uniform that's high class. And the movie literally is just wow, why doesn't she just eat out of the trash? And that's what he's so disrespectful sometimes when it comes to things like that. And so that's what frustrates me about The Judgment. The Judgment is what always frustrates me about his work.
it is such a severe lack of judgment about like how, I don't know, humans work.
Yeah.
Like in Diary of a Mad Black Woman, the husband literally tosses his wife out onto the front lawn and is like, go away. And this is how that works. Like, what? Anyway, A Fall from Grace has a lot of that jam-packed into this like wannabe episode of How to Get Away with Murder, essentially. And I feel very bad because I think that there are a lot of talented people in this movie, like talented actors who are doing their darndest. But due to lack of resources and Tyler Perry's poor judgment, it just is such a weak outing for this icon. Like I hate that this was her last movie.
Okay, well let's go back to Miss Sarah's house. It's all right. She probably doesn't even know you're out here. Let's go. Let's get you out this rain.
No, don't make me go back there. Please do.
It's okay. It's okay. I got you. You're with me now.
I want to go to my house. My house.
Was there anything else that you saw you didn't particularly like? I do have one that I'm just going to jump right into, but I couldn't in good conscience give it my 1-star review because it's literally a one scene role, but she has a very small role in this film called The Haunting in Connecticut 2 Ghosts of Georgia. She plays a character named Mama Kay who shows up for one scene, and she's wearing like big buck teeth and she has milky white eyes and she's blind, and it's, you know, we talked about it in our Joan Crawford episode, the subgenre that is psycho biddy or hagsploitation, and it really felt like that. It's like when you take a really like a lauded actress and you dress her up real funny and you put her in a horror movie, and like I said, it's only one scene, so I couldn't really, but I was just like, I guess you gotta get paid.
Yeah. I did not watch The Haunting in Connecticut 2 Ghosts of Georgia. Sounds
but you do like saying the name.
I do like saying the name, yeah. I don't think there's a lot that, is, wrong in her filmography. There is not, beyond the scope of Tyler Perry and, I don't know, ghost stories, I guess, there's not a lot where I'm like, oh, I didn't enjoy that movie. Not at all.
No, I definitely agree with that because I enjoyed a lot of the films I saw and had a really good time. Why don't we move out of our 1-star reviews and move into our 5-star reviews?
There is a dearth to choose from to get to a 5-star review. But mine, it has to be the Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. It is a stunner of a movie that I couldn't wrap my head around. If you look at a picture of Cicely Tyson, at the time she was 49 years old, right in the middle of, this character who she's playing from 23 to 110. And, she looks very young. She was a very beautiful woman, high cheekbones, perfect skin. So not a stretch to play a 23-year-old. And she even said that, so whatever. But the majority of the film, or I would say at least 50% of the film, she's in this special effects makeup, and she is, not only that, she's hunched over, barely able to walk. You can see just like the years in her eyes. You can see the way she's using her mouth to talk and speak. It's incredible. I don't know if I've seen a more physical or a committed role or actor committed like this to a role ever.
And I also want to just say real quick, it's her actual voice. They were going to dub her because, and it's very true, and you'll see it in a lot of movies, people playing old people, you don't sound the same. You absolutely do not.
Right.
But the voice Cicely was able to like pull out of herself and make is so realistic, and so
she doesn't. A lot of it is her. I mean, so there is the incredible makeup, and there's nothing I can say about her performance that takes away from the craftsmanship of the makeup done on her. But they were gonna give her a hump. She didn't need it. No. They were gonna give she was the one talking to producers about, I know exactly what my teeth should look like. I know what I need to do to get my eyes. It's to get to about this movie, the movie is structured as there is a reporter, and he wants to tell the story of this 110-year-old woman. And so it's a lot of reflections of her looking back at her time as, all the way back as a slave, getting their freedom, and just her entire life through the civil rights movement. And up to the end, going and using a water fountain that's only for whites. And so there's like a nice frame on it of this reporter who's a white man who's just like asking her these questions, and it's so lovely, the moments where he's in his brain, he's asking what he thinks is an innocent question, and she's like, God, you really don't fucking get it, do you?
Yeah.
Like you really know so little about my experience, our experience. And it's so moving,
It's funny to think, and I hadn't thought about this till we were just talking about it right now, but the to compare it to something like The Help, which really centers a white person in the narrative of all these black stories, where this doesn't. This uses the white person sort of the way they should be used in a story like this, which is like as an entryway for your white audience.
It's even using the white reporter thing that The Help does.
Yeah.
Emma Stone's character is a reporter, but like this is literally a man who is trying to tell his editor, like, no, there's an amazing woman here. I need to tell her story.
Yeah.
And using that as the entryway where literally we're going to sit with her and talk about her experience.
And she's going to tell the story, and she's going to be the one who, imparts and it's going to begin and end with her.
Right.
And I'm just the observer. Yeah.
Right. The scene where she's sitting at the big oak tree where he's like asking his questions, and she's talking about, this tree's 400 years old and has seen it all. And it's just like this beautiful moment and obvious like parallel where she's just talking about, we come from this land, we see it grow and change all around us, and we're just witness. We're just a witness to, life. And it truly is a stunning movie and a stunning acting masterclass. I don't even know what words to say. And I don't know what would have happened if it would have been like on the big screen, because it's on the cover. It says one of TV's all-time best. It truly fucking is.
Yeah.
And like Gavin said, it's on HBO Max. So if this is your entry point, go with God, because it's very good.
It's so worth watching. It really is.
This oak tree, I'm sure it's been here as long as this place been here. And I ain't ashamed to tell you that I talked to it. And I ain't crazy either. It ain't necessary craziness to talk to the rivers and the trees. It ain't craziness, son. It's just the nobility you respect.
I came into this torn because I also really think like there is no better achievement of displaying her talent than the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. I think really it runs the gamut of just, and it's not just about the old and young thing. It's the passion she puts into it, the emotion. This is a woman who sees parts of her family die. She sees her husband die. And one of the smartest things I think the movie does is, her son leaves for a while to get an education, and he comes back and he's trying to educate people, and she knows he's gonna die. She knows white men are gonna kill him for basically being educated and trying to impart that education on other black people. And she gets really emotional and she tries to warn him, and when she realizes that there's no turning back, she lets him sermonize, she lets him depart his message, and he walks over to her and he's like, and now I'm going to die. Yeah. And the thing that she does is, she's not hysterical. She's not, moribund. She's just sitting with it because she knows that's
because
the eventuality.
She's already at that age, has lived with so many horrors.
Yeah.
She's seen 80% of her people die in front of her.
Yeah.
As they were leaving slavery, you know, like, and I think that's also a story that isn't told that often, where it's like a lot of these slaves, when they said, you're free now, where did they go?
Right.
They didn't have anything. And on top of that,
Reconstruction failed. And so
yeah, on top of that, people were also fucking monsters and like killing free slaves who were trying to find a new home. So Gavin, you agree that?
So yeah, I really do think it's my other one, but I think, it's got to be Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. But if I had to, so I guess we're in the part where I say, is there anything else that you saw that you like? But I do think it's absolute 5-star review. The River Niger. The River Niger is based on a play by Joseph A. Walker. It is, an Obie Award winner, a Tony Award winner. It's a great play, and unfortunately, this film version is like not restored anywhere. You can watch it on YouTube, you can watch it on Amazon Prime, but it is literally a VHS rip. It's such poor quality. And because of that, I think a lot of people, like, I kept running into reviews of people being like, oh, it looks like a TV show. Oh, it looks so bad and fake. And it's like, yeah, part of that is like, one part of it is nobody's paying to have it restored. And the other part of it is nobody was fucking paying for films with an all black cast. And that's what I mean by the fact that like she may have like inadvertently starred in a couple blaxploitation films, because I think A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich and The River Niger are basically have the same look and budget of what would be considered blaxploitation films. But they're serious dramas about topical issues. I mentioned earlier, she plays this mother to this son who he's in the Air Force, and he flunks out of the Air Force school, and he gets really disillusioned, and he sort of falls in with a local gang that feels very kind of stand-in for the Black Panthers, but much more militant. It's sort of a downward trajectory from there, and how his new life is intersecting with her life. Midway through the movie, you find out, she is dying of a reoccurring cancer.
Matty has cancer.
Godly, you're about as gentle as sledgehammer.
Serious. Very serious, but not hopeless. The location prevents removal. However, cobalt treatments might...
Jeff, look at me. I'm not upset, am I? Look at me. Come on, Jeff. I'm just gonna die, that's all.
James Earl Jones plays her husband and this kid's father, who's played, by the way, her son's played by the great Glynn Turman, who I have just absolutely fucking love and is so amazing. And I feel like most people have most recently seen as Toledo and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. But it's just this family drama, and it sort of devolves into, drama and violence, but it's a really masterful performance. And I think she is so controlled as this mother character, and so quiet, and she's reserved and keeps it inside. And it's just fascinating to watch, especially when you compare it to something like The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, where she's, having to play such a large span of this life and all these sort of different emotions. In The River Niger, you're really seeing like maybe a week to a month of this woman's life, but also you get to know her so well and so deep and connect to her. But yeah, I really love that movie. And sorry, I know I just rambled about that, but once again, it's another movie that you can watch, you can see, but please keep in mind that like it looks the way it does because people are fucking ridiculous and won't pay to restore it.
And that movie is so rich. You can tell that there's this great rich screenplay. Like you can tell that it was a play. This is the 70s, and thinking about the African connections and obviously the name of it, but there's also like this African doctor, and there's like this entire idea of like what is Black identity, who is the Black American. The movie is very rich. I too watched it on Amazon Prime, and it was very, very good.
As you mentioned before, though, there is a plethora of films. Sounder, she absolutely deserved that Academy Award nomination, and I really recommend that. You mentioned A Man Called Adam earlier, which I think, barring the ending, which I found a little like, especially her performance is really great. One of the films we didn't mention earlier is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which I don't think is a full successful adaptation of the novel that it's based on, but she plays a character named Portia, and she's very good in that film. Fried Green Tomatoes, once again, not a huge role, but a very, very memorable role.
And also, just last thing, A Woman Called Moses, which is on Amazon Prime as well. Another stunning portrayal of a. I would say I like Woman Called Moses better than King. I think she has more to do. And
I liked King. Both of us watched all of King, which, by the way, is 5 hours.
Very long.
So we both spent the time. My problem with King is it's very academic, and and like that's fine. It's probably a better teaching tool than it is, dramatic work. But
yeah, totally. But that also just kind of like talks to like how she has so much, even for her, the limited opportunities that she was given because of the industry. Like so much of her work is very, very good. I would even say if you've got the Lifetime, logins and all that mess, like Trip to Bountiful is a wonderful play, and she's very good in it. Just a story about, we shouldn't throw away our old people. Old people are still people.
But before we move into our fast forward, why don't we do our mixed reviews? So my 1-star review was 2012's Alex Cross.
Mine was 2020's A Fall from Grace.
And my 5-star review, which also was your 5-star review, is 1974's The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. Though, once again, seriously, watch The River Niger from 1972 on Amazon Prime.
And also Sounder and all those other movies we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Just watch them. Seriously, it's worth it. So we're now in our fast forward, and as we mentioned, she did pass away last week on January 28th, 2021. Last week, she was age 96. Fast forward usually reserved for what we're hoping for next or what we'd like to see. Obviously, she's not going to be doing another film, but I think what I hope is that her legacy is fully honored as this trailblazer, as this person who spent her career, as you said, as you put so perfectly, in service of, listen, it's not her job to tell you that Black people are human beings as well, but she did it. And she spent her entire career doing it. Yeah. And I think that's admirable. And she did it well, and she was so incredibly talented, and she was awarded for it. But I hope that the legacy she leaves behind is that she is not only just an entertainer, not only an icon, but she's a leader, and she was able to impart her life's work as a roadmap for all these other people to follow, and to be able to open doors and do their things.
Yeah, like leader is the perfect word, because her legacy is Viola Davis. Her legacy is Regina King. It is Kimberly Elise. It's Tyler Perry even. Like it's all of these people who have been able to, build upon her success. She talks a lot about Tyler Perry Studios and how he had to bring his own chair to the table. Said, okay, fine. She talks about Ava DuVernay and doing the same thing. She talks about Oprah. She talks about like all these people, and it's just like truly she's been here through all of it. When we talk about how Regina King is a true queen, like that's because of Cicely Tyson. And then honestly, Cicely Tyson says, Dorothy Dandridge. Like it's a legacy. Like her legacy is the Harlem Dance Theater. Her legacy is this high school in New Jersey where 600 kids are, learning their craft and are going to be able to overcome their station in life. Like it's her legacy. I mean, she worked so hard. And I think everywhere you look across the industry, like her legacy is all around us.
The metaphor that she uses constantly in Just As I Am is of a tree. very much like in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And I think that's what she proved, is that her roots ended up touching everybody. And those are the foundations in which they've built or have been able to build careers and lives off of. And yeah, so I agree. I truly hope that, you know, she is remembered for all the amazing things she did and everything she was able to accomplish in her very full life.
And she was working until the end.
Absolutely.
The end. You know, I think she saw, I mean, she's in the book, she talks about Breonna Taylor, and she was still so connected to what was going on. She was still so connected to, you know, to politics, to the struggle. The struggle continued, and she continued to fight alongside. I mean, it's just, you know, it really is inspiring to, you know, talk about someone who, you know, was not only just an amazing entertainer, but was just this human dedicated to other people. She was dedicated to her daughter, dedicated to her friends, dedicated to her family, and all these wonderful, talented Black people around her. God, she talks about Jane Fonda.
Yeah.
And they met on a movie together. And
a really terrible movie that we didn't mention called The Bluebird, but yeah.
And she talks about how Jane Fonda was immediately just so loving, so kind, and they talked about the fucking Vietnam War and how fucked up it was. Jane Fonda might be the one person that can say who has, for her entire career, also been as passionate about causes outside of her entertainment career. She's part of Cicely's legacy as well, because they cross paths as well. She does have these roots, like that tree you mentioned, everywhere. So as we, you know, begin this Black History Month, and as we continue in this reawakening of social justice and reckoning, and fight that we continue, I just have to say, you know, to Cicely, thank you. And everyone out there, dear listener, you know, can search out her work, look for her work, take that in, and take part of that with you.
Yeah.
I mean, truly going for it, I was like, God, a life of service.
Absolutely.
I don't know why that connected with me so much, hearing it from her. I think I've heard that before, but hearing it from her and then seeing all the things that she has done.
Because you believed it. And that's really what it, you know, because she was constantly putting, you know, the work where her mouth was. She was constantly, I don't know, she was paying the dividends, you know. Yeah. That's the thing. And so, yeah, I agree with those sentiments exactly, Louie. Thank you, Cicely Tyson, and obviously rest in power.
Absolutely. I feel very warm and fuzzy about Cicely now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron, for suggesting her to us. Everyone else, please send us your suggestions. We'll put them on the list.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, we are always going to try and get to every suggestion that we get. But we, like Louie said up front, we have a back catalog, so we sort of pre-plan ahead and know what because it's a real labor of love what we're trying to do. So, and we want to give everybody their due, you know, not just willy-nilly. And but yeah,
not willy or nilly. Okay,
absolutely
not for Cicely.
But if you do want to send us your messages, you can always find us at Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
Or on Facebook, just type in The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
Or on Instagram, just _mixed_reviews.
And if you want to continue listening to us, you can subscribe to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, Audible. We are everywhere.
I know a lot of you, I know, are going through the back catalogs. I've been hearing from some of y'all.
You know what? Jennifer Lopez has been blowing up for like 2 weeks. I don't know why.
Let's get loud, honeys.
But yeah, and honestly, if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, if you could go there and leave us a 5-star rating and write us a little review, we'll read it on the show, because we love hearing from you, and we love you, specifically you.
This is our service to you. We are giving to you. The way that you guys give us love, we send it back in the form of little podcasts to put in your tiny little ears. Thank you, everyone. I think that's it.
Yes, thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Cicely Tyson, for all the work that you did. And we will be back in 2 weeks with a special guest and a whole new subject.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
This is my story. Tra-la-la-la. This is my song. Hey, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, and this is my song. I am praising my Savior.